So I was looking back to the previous PowerPoint in week 4. I'm still wondering why can we choose C?
Uh, I, I have to, my glasses, sorry. Where are we?
I was wondering why can we choose C?
Oh, really? Which statement is true? Material processes do not require conscious being executed. They don't. Being, becoming, and having regulation processes. True. Mental processes require conscious being is the sensor. True.
So,
Should be all of the above. Material processes do not require. Yes, true. Yes. Being, becoming, having. True. Both require conscious being as the sensor. True. It's all of the above. Did I say it was smoking and being?
I wasn't sure. I need to check it. Maybe I took the wrong notes.
No, 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 no.
The same as
It's the in the ER role, right? Doer, the doing process is the doer, sensor, and the mental process. Right? So,
Oh, sorry, I took the wrong note.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can we begin again? We're looking at foreground. We're asking the question, when do you know when it's deliberate? When can you know that it's really hard? Not just some break in the usual pattern, but it's just. And we're going to take a look at this poem to begin with. So, if you have your handout, please take a look at that first poem. It's written by an Australian poet. And let me read it. I'll get up soon and leave my bed unmade. I'll go outside and split off kindling wood from the yellow box log that lies beside the gate. The sun will be high, for I get up late now. I'll drive my axe in the log and come back in with my armful of wood and pause to look across the Christmas paddocks aching in the heat, the windless trees, the nettles in the yard. And then I'll go in, boil water, and make tea. This afternoon, I'll stand out on the hill and watch my house away below, and how the roof reflects the sun and makes my eyes water and close on bright wet visions smeared on the dark of my thoughts to dance and fade away. The sun will move on, and I will simply watch or work or sleep, and evening will draw in. Coming on dark, I'll go home, light the lamp, eat my corned beef supper, sitting there at the head of the table. Then I'll go to bed. Last night I thought I dreamed, but when I woke, the screen was only a possum skiing down the iron roof under the moving walls. What's the meaning of the poem? is there a linguistic analysis that we can do that will give us some idea of not only the contrast, the pattern that is here? I mean, first of all, reading it, the widower in the country, the widower, he's lost his wife. How do you feel when you read this? A bit boring. I mean, his life is just routine. He'll do this, and then he'll do this, and then he'll do that. And so it's nothing exciting here. So what does it tell us? Let's just take the first part here. I'll get up soon, leave my bed unmade. I'll go outside and split off kindling wood from the yellow box log that lies beside the gate. The sun will be high, for I get up late now. I'll drive my axe in the log, come back in with my armful of wood, pause to look across the Christmas paddocks aching in the heat, the windless trees, the nettles in the yard, and then I'll go in, boil water, and make tea. Let's do our analysis. Our usual analysis, looking at the ER role. Who is the actor, the censor, the behavior, the carrier? And we have just a certain number of, we have the widower, obviously. We have that possum skiing down the roof. We have some objects. We have the yellow box log. We have the roof. We have some indication of time, the sun, the evening. And we have an event, screaming. Taking a look at this, we see that there's a lot about the widower. So what consistency can we find? What contrast can we find? Okay, so let's begin. Let's add up the numbers. The widower, 28 times is mentioned. Well, that's obviously the background. That's the consistency. I mean, that's the pattern. It's about the widower. And the widower as a doer, as a censor, as a behavior, We do have the possum, we have the object, the others, the rest here. So other than the widower, we could say that those are foreground. They're different. We have a background. So obviously the widower is the one that's more frequent, but we do have some others that are mentioned, less so. So let's just say that they are foreground. And what else can we say? Well, we can see that the doing is 27. So again, the doing is more, is the pattern. And mental, behavioral, relational, much less so. So these we can say are foreground. Okay, so far, that's all we can see. Let's keep going. We can come up in terms of then the transitivity. Material or doing is in contrast with the other process types. The widower as doer is in contrast with the other participants. Okay, so that's in transitivity. What else do we have to look for? Logical. If you look at the text if you will. What do you see as the most frequent kind of logical connection in this text? What is the most frequent? And. Do this and I'll do that. And occurs most frequently. So what is that? That's called parataxis, right? So we have clauses that are combined through parataxis is the most frequent, but we do have some just a few, where we have the same sentence, parataxis and hypotaxis and embedding or rank shifting in the same sentence. That stands out, okay? That's, again, that compared to parataxis just occurring in the sentence. We have some sentences which are parataxis and hypotaxis and embedding, all three. So let's keep track of what those are. What else could we say? Well, you said the conjunction and, right? Well, what were other conjunctions? Were other conjunctions used? Yes. For, or, but. Where did they occur? So what we're doing is we're trying to identify where do we see the foregrounding of logical relations? Where do we see the foregrounding of what kind of coordination, what kind of conjunction? Logical. The repetition of the conjunction and sets a background of simple parataxis in contrast with complex clauses which combine parataxis, hypotaxis, and rank shifting, all three together. What else do we have to look for? Tense. Again, can I ask you, take a look at this. What's the tense? What's the typical tense? It's on the here, and you probably have it on your slides as well, so you can see it better on your iPad or your computer. What is it? What do you see here occurs most frequently? Future. I'll do this. I'll do that. So you have the future, which occurs throughout. That is the pattern. What else occurs though? You have a few present tense. We have the past tense occurs at the very end here. And we have some non-finite verbs as well. These stand out against the background of future. What have we identified so far? Transitivity, material, doing in contrast with other process types. The widower is the doer in contrast with other participants. Logical, repetition of the conjunction and, background of simple parataxis in contrast with complex clauses which combine parataxis and hypotaxis and rank shifting. Tense, future tense in contrast with the other tenses. What else do we have to look for? The I repeated as the. Okay, so transitivity, logical, tense, theme. You see all these contrasts. Consistency. Where do they occur? That's the question. Where do they occur? Do they occur together? So combine the consistent foregrounding, the logical, the process types, the transitivity, the theme, taking just these and identifying where they occurred together. And they occur together at 3 points throughout the poem. What is the writer drawing your attention to? Giving you this background, taking the usual way we use language, mobilizing the typical way we use language into a non-habitual consistency, all future, all and, all that, and then breaking it at certain points consistently and creating our attention here. And where has our attention been drawn? With my arm full of wood, pause to look across the Christmas paddocks. The roof reflects the sun and makes my eyes water, close. What happens when your eyes are watering, closing? Tears. On bright wet visions, and look at that, what it says here, smeared on the dark of my thoughts. Yes, we have aching, we have darkness, we have tears, and finally, where it really is highlighted with a past tense at the very end, we have this who's screaming. He was sleeping. He doesn't know who was screaming. Maybe it was him who was screaming. We are being brought to see this widower in his sadness, in his grief, in his pain. And our attention against the background and the backdrop of all this just usual routine activity, where does his heart come through to us? Consistency of choices weaves what David Buck calls the poem's existential fabric. It's a beautiful line. The existential fabric of the poem. Les Murray's Widower in the Country poignantly points to its theme concerning the essence of humanity. To be human, to be an individual, you need to be with others. What makes human existence sane, what protects it from nightmarish chimera, is another's company. This is what Professor Hassan wrote. It is her hypothesis about the meaning of the poem. But where does her hypothesis come from? It comes from analyzing the background, the foreground, identifying with the contrast, and noting where those contrasts all sort of come together to focus your attention as the reader. Let's take another one. I'm sure you've heard this poem before, right? Two roads, the road not taken. All right.
Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as there, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. As for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the verse for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I should be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
It's a famous American poet.
Now, another addition to our NewsHour bookshelf. We look at a new take on a long admired American poem. Arts correspondent Jeffrey Brown has that.
Two roads diverged in a yellowed wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, long I stood. The first lines of one of the best-known American poems by one of the nation's best-loved poets, Robert Frost. It's called The Road Not Taken, and that's the title of the new book that calls it the poem everyone loves and almost everyone gets wrong. Author David Orr's poetry columnist for the New York Times Book Review and joins us now. Welcome to you. So it's read as a kind of hey on to individualist.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why you see it in so many graduation speeches. That's why you see it in commercials. I mean, there's no company in the world that would put the poem up as part of their commercial if they knew what the poem is more likely to mean.
Which is what?
Okay. I want you to think about that. What is the meaning of the poem? He's saying it's the meaning is what everyone gets wrong. And he's going to tell us what the meaning is. Is there a way that we can find it? How? Find it in the use of language. Take a look at the poem if you would for a moment. What do you think was the meaning of the poem? What do you think was the meaning of the poem? Approaching it now as a linguist, approaching it with the resources and the tools that we have, that we're familiar with as linguists doing text analysis. Not just coming up with sort of, I think it means this, or I think it means that, but is there anything that we can identify in the use of language itself that gives us a sense of what maybe is the theme? And I stress that maybe is the theme. It's an interpretation. It's just like the interpretation that Professor Hassan gave for the widower in the country. Her interpretation here is this: Frost, the road not taken, read with an understanding of its deepest message, will leave an impression of the theme. That is the immutability of human choice, the unchanging quality of human choice. Made lightly because through the thick curtain of the present it appeared less than momentous. The realization comes too late that the lightly made choice has made all the difference. Choices that we make, we can't undo. And yet they will have consequences. That's basically what she's saying. So let's take a look. Now, she never got the chance to publish this analysis. She passed away before she finished. She had prepared the notes and everything for this analysis. And I was given the notes. So this is based on her notes. Again, I want to remind you what we are looking at. It's what you're familiar with, transitivity. What kind of processes are taking place? Who initiates? Who is affected? What are the circumstances? Things that we are very familiar with. Hassan adds to something here. She adds another dimension. She adds a dimension, not just a process and who is in the ER role and so forth. What she's suggesting is that there is sort of a climb, a continuum. Some are more dynamic and others less so. Does it make sense? Yeah, well, I mean, you have actor with a goal, doing something to something else. That's quite dynamic. Saying something to someone else. And you have the intransitive, just doing something, but not to someone else. Again, saying, but without saying it to others. Behaving, what goes on in your mind, the sensing, the relational, being the recipient of something, being the goal of something, being the one something's done to. Well, yeah, that would be not so dynamic. So, in a way, it's an interesting perspective on the processes. Some more dynamic, more active, than others. And then when we look at this particular poem, we see examples of an actor with a goal, the intransitive actor with no goal, saying without an addressee, behaving, sensing, relational. And that's where they come in the poem. So we're taking our analysis, we're identifying a dimension to the idea of transitivity. It's not been something we've mentioned before, thought of before, it's new. So applying that to this, we take a look and we see where does, these would be, black would be the actor in a medium, actor is medium in an intransitive process. B here, purple would be relational, looked, behavioral. Those in red are more the actor with a goal. Where do they occur? Take, kept, take, made. Well, again, let's start to count a bit. Within that framework, I begin to take a look and I begin to see the I occurs twice, to take and kept. Well, both of those refer to choice. Right? Which road to take? And kept the other one for another name. So in terms of I, it's just here, this actor with a goal. What she concludes from that is basically the non-dynamic nature of the protagonist in this poem. It's not the only dynamic action that is taken, that is made, is to make a choice. Your focus is all on the choice. So your attention is being drawn to choosing. What about the road? Well, the road has no dynamic process at all. They're simply the medium. They're not the agent. They're not doing anything. I guess you would expect that from the road. But what she says is this, that the universe that is being set up, what's being established in this poem then, is one in which the dynamic role is not appear to be assigned either the I or the roads. We are not capable of affecting the world around us. But then, where do you see this? Worn, trodden. That's quite interesting. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. The passing. What do we call that? We call that a grammatical metaphor. We aren't mentioning anybody who's doing it. It's the passing wore them down. No active role is being played here. The only active role basically is the choice. No other active role. And wore them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves. No step. Again, it's not like somebody is trotting. It's no step. Again, the noun, not the verb. So who is trotting it? Who is wearing it down? Anonymous. No identity. These are anonymous acts. Nobody else is being mentioned. The environment is influenced by anonymous, faceless beings. The only effectual thing is the anonymous, timeless passing steps. So there's a world in which there is no one is doing anything. The road is completely no dynamic quality whatsoever. The only dynamic quality is brought out here is what? Choice. Okay, what about the taxis relations? What about the relations here? Hypotaxis, parataxis, what do you see here? What is the sort of the common here? We have and, then, and. We only really have two hypotactic conjunctions here. The rest are all paratactic. That paratactic supports this idea of the symmetry, the choices of two. And that is what we see throughout the poem. But then where does this occur? Let's summarize sort of where we have come from. Two alternatives present themselves. What are the alternatives? One, not taken. Let's take a look. What does it say here? Look down one to where it bent in the undergrowth. The other, which I took, then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted fair. There is no choice but to choose. You have to choose. You cannot, unless you don't move. You have to choose. But there is no basis for the choice. Basically, they are equal. And though, as for that passing there, had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. This anonymous actions that wore them down, both are the same. What's foregrounded? Because though the grammatical metaphor, the passing, no step, the choice that you took blocked out the other. I kept the first for another day. And it's only here that you have these mental processes that occur. That's the consistency. Where you find the foreground even. The mental processes co-occur with this kept, which is the only other dynamic process that is carried out by the protagonist. Two alternatives presented themselves. No choice but to choose. No real basis for choice. The choice taken blocked out the other. The consequence of forced choice. The last, it ends. I shall be telling this. What is this? Two rows indistinguishable, the taking of one without any real justification. That's what this is. I will be telling this. Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled on. And that. The only other verb that involves an action is the choice itself. Makes all the difference. Again, we're drawn to this action of the choice. The only thing that we have done, and that choice, making that choice, has made all the difference. Bringing out this idea of what the nature of the choice. Ruqayyah Hassan describes a literary artifact, a poem like this, as an extended metaphor. What is an extended metaphor? It's not a lexical metaphor. It's not a grammatical metaphor. It is an extended metaphor because that pattern that you see that creates the background against which one foregrounds, that creates the metaphor. The metaphor itself is created. It is what is foregrounded. It is the de-automatization. It is taking and making it automatic and then breaking. Again, what did she conclude? Cross the road not taken. Read with an understanding of its deepest message. Excuse me. Will leave an impression of the theme, the immutability of human choice. Made lightly because through the thick curtain of the present it appeared less than momentous. The realization comes too late, but the lightly made choice has made all the difference. I'm going to do one poem of Edwin Tumblew's today. It is this poem that is on the page. It's Gods Can Die. Edwin Tumble, described as Singapore's father of English language poetry. The School of Creative Media and CBU created an exhibition in which they took his poetry and did this presentation. It was shown in Shanghai. It's perhaps even more impressive. Have any of you been to Singapore? Have any of you been? What? Well, when you went to Singapore, did you see the Merlion? Did you go in front of the Merlion? When you go back, or when the rest of you go, you see the Merlion. It's on a platform, and in front of the Merlion is like a podium with a text written in stone, engraved in front of it. On that engraving is a poem by Edmund Tumble, Ulysses by the Merlion. So I worked in Singapore before I came to Hong Kong. This is a long time ago. This is in the 80s. After I got my PhD, I went to work at the National University of Singapore. Edmund Tumble was my boss, you could say. He was the dean and he was the head of the department. And so it was interesting to me to begin to take a look at his poetry. I've been reading Rupai Hassan, and I'm beginning to think that, yes, we can look at a poem and we can begin to see the patterning and look for the foregrounding. And so I would take this poetry and I would analyze it in much the same way that we've been analyzing other texts. We look for what was special about this poetry. He says this: I'm looking at language as part of my life. I'm trying to create, to make my poems, putting language together. Technique is all about poetry, the making, the chiseling of language, the rearranging of language, the sound, the rhythm, the tautness, the layering. He's very much focused on the language. When he began the Department of English Language and Literature, before at National University of Singapore, he just been a Department of Literature. He brought in language, linguistics. So he's very much attuned to language, and he sees language indeed as a resource, as a tool to create his poetry, as he puts it. The chiseling of language, the rearranging of language, the sound, the rhythm, the tautness, the layer. Gods can die. You can follow along.
Gods can die. I have seen powerful men undo themselves into realities, one for minor friends, one for the powers that be, the really powerful. Such people take a role supporting managers of states, accept an essential part in some minor project. But after a bit of duty that makes them fester with intentions, they play the major figure. We understand and try to seek a balance in the dark. Know the private from the public moment. To find our way between the private and the public community. Or what can be said, or if a thing is meant, or meant to make amends, is generous or mean. The casual word, the easiness, the quick straight answer, the humane debate, the lack of falseness, that give ample laughter to our meanings, are too simple for these days of power, nature, not state. So when one has a chance to talk, the conversation hesitates on the brink of momentous things. He ponders, suggesting by some unremarked there was much more. It's a pity. Good men who seek to serve find themselves under a cause that use the fate of nations as a rationale. Take their friends aside to lead themselves into some history. Begin uncertain statement. Many. But I'm glad that others are powerful with compassion to see before we do what troubles us and help in kindness. Take ignorance in joy. If not for such, we some course would live, but now our time.
He wrote the poem for a friend. The friend had, as you can sort of see, gotten high up in government. And suddenly it all changed. The friend was very much now aloof and was no longer could connect because he was too powerful to do so. So what is the existential fabric? Remember David Butt's quote. What that existential fabric is symmetry, duality, two. As you look through it, you see a lot of pairs, things that are also compared. So we see, for example, major versus minor, private versus public, generous versus mean, gain versus lose, live versus die, int versus state. And so there's this, again, this symmetry, this pairing. There's a sense of duality between truth and falsehood, good and evil, life and death. But it's also there, not just lexically, but it's also there in the text itself. When we look at the logical structuring here, we see apposition, like two nouns that are side by side, one next to each other. We see opposition, we see addition, negation, alternation. All these are parataxis. Powerful men undo themselves. Good men find themselves. Again, that contrast. The relaxed spirit of our evenings is contrasted with these days of power. But then against that symmetry, that duality, there exists an undercurrent of confusion, contradiction. He asked the question, can gods die? Take a look, if you will, at the beginning. I have seen powerful men. That's joined with powerful men. Powerful men undo themselves. Powerful men keep two realities. That's one layer of parataxis. Keep two realities. Another layer of parataxis. One for minor friends, one for the powers that be. One for the powers that be, the really powerful. We see layer upon layer of parataxis. Again, such people take a role. Such people accept essential part in some minor project. All of this beginning here is paratactic. But then he breaks it. He breaks it with hypotaxis, but after a bit of duty that makes them fester with intentions, they play the major figure to old friends. When he wants to focus your attention on the change in the behavior of this person, he begins to use hypotaxis. The next part, we understand and try to seek a balance in the dark, to know the private from the public monument, to find our way between the private and public argument. to find our way between the private and public argument, or what can be said, or if a thing is meant or meant to make amends, is generous or mean, layer upon layer upon layer, again, parataxis. And then it's paratactic in the sense of repeating the casual word, the easiness, the quick, straight answer, the humane delay, the lack of cautiousness. But then again, he breaks that. Hypotaxis. So when one has a chance to talk, I want you to know, when I read this poem the first time, as I was reading it, so when one has a chance to talk the conversation, because it continues on one line like that, you don't stop when you get to talk. You sort of misspeak, because you don't realize this is the subject of the next line. And you think you're continuing. So you realize that you made a mistake. And what do? You pause. He actually writes it so that you do pause. Just like what this person does, ponders. Not really open anymore, not able to talk, not willing to talk. Edwin Talbot says this, I believe that ultimately man makes and unmakes his destiny, depending on which side of him prevails. We are like two sides. Elaborating on the poem's title, Gods Can Die, Talbot explains that the term gods refers to humanistic impulses, the goodness in man. There is a goodness, but which he saw disappear in his friend as he became more powerful. The duality apparent in the text's personality apparently reflects the poet's feelings about his friend's personality, which is judged to be two-faced, hypocritical. The poet's frustration and disdain for what power has done in their relationship is made particularly evident through the foregrounding of elements that disturb an otherwise balanced state. There's a balance, there's a symmetry, there is parataxis, and then it breaks. And where it breaks is where he's drawing your attention to what he sees as his friend's change in behavior. I think that's enough for tonight. This poem, Talbot's David, he wrote it for me. He sent it to me and it said for Jonathan Webster. And I think he expected, because I had just analyzed Thoughts and Die. I wrote it up, I put it in a journal, and then he sent me this poem. And he wanted me to analyze it. So he's done that not more than once. He sent this poem, and specifically, and of course, because he wrote it for me, I had to find out what was the meaning of the poem. What was he saying to me, right? So there was a challenge there. Next week, we'll also look at another of his poems, Poet Reading. When he sent me that poem, he sent it with a little, one of these yellow notes on the top, and it said, analyze this. So he's challenging us to find out what is the poem, what does it mean? But we want to look at it from the standpoint of what does our linguistics tell us? How does it give us an idea as to what's going on in the poetry? Okay? Good night.